Hello, everyone. I'm Bert Covert, co-chair of the American Society of Primatologists Conservation Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar titled Bridging Primate Habitats. I anticipate that you will find this to be a very interesting event. This webinar is being recorded and will be deposited on the ASP Conservation Videos page, and the recording will reside on our YouTube channel, AMSOC, Primatologists Conservation Committee. I also encourage you to consider making a cash donation to support conservation projects funded by the ASP Conservation Committee. And if you're not a member, think about joining the American Society of Primatologists. Again, I'm Bert Covert, co-chair of the ASP Conservation Committee and professor of anthropology at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm honored to be introducing this webinar. I want to thank Marilyn Norncock, my co-chair of the ASP Conservation Committee and professor emeritus of anthropology at Kent State University, for planning this event. This would not be happening without her dedicated efforts. I also want to thank Jennifer Kramer for her wonderful contributions to the virtual environment that's hosting this webinar. Jennifer is a primatologist and the program director for sociology, anthropology, and general studies at American Public University System. Next slide, please. Before introducing the organizers of today's event, I want to remind all of you that the annual meeting of the American Society of Primatologists will be November 17th through 20th in Oklahoma City, and it will be in person. Proposals for symposia, workshops, and roundtables should be submitted between June 15th and June 30th. An abstract should be submitted between June 15th and July 15th. Please plan on joining us for cutting-edge presentations on the ecology, behavior, anatomy, welfare, and conservation of captive and wild primates. Personally, I cannot wait to be able to meet with many of you once again in person in just under 8 months in Oklahoma City. Next slide, please. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our organizers. Dr. Tremy Gregory is a research scientist at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute Center for Conservation and Sustainability. In her 10 years at the Smithsonian, she has implemented natural canopy bridge projects to mitigate the impacts of pipelines in the Peruvian Amazon. And co-organizer, Dr. Fernanda Abra, is a Brazilian road ecologist, and her research and applied projects aim to reduce wildlife road mortality on roads and railways. She's an incoming postdoc fellow with Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. For her postdoc project, she will test 2 different canopy bridges, designs for arboreal species over a highway in the Brazilian Amazon. So take it away, Tremy.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. I'm so excited to be here, and I would like to welcome everyone from all around the world. This is such an honor to host this event. Thank you so much to ASP for inviting me to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to wish a very happy birthday to my co-organizer. She is a daily inspiration. Fernanda has so much energy, and it's so exciting to work with her. So as Bert said, I'm a researcher at the Center for Conservation and Sustainability. And at CCS, we partner with industry to design and implement best practices to reduce the impacts of infrastructure on biodiversity. I have therefore had the opportunity to engage in canopy bridge projects that mitigate the fragmentation impacts of natural gas pipelines on wildlife in the Peruvian Amazon. Like this example behind me. Here is a canopy bridge over a pipeline, and there I am climbing up into the canopy to install canopy bridges, to install camera traps in these canopy bridges. This was a hugely successful project, a really exciting project to work on. But I realized that natural canopy bridges are not a possibility everywhere. A lot of places obviously have already been fragmented, and we need to retrofit solutions. So I came to think that artificial bridges are really the solution in most contexts. And today we're going to be learning about some examples from the 3 major primate habitat continents, We have Anna Nekaris, who will talk about an example from Indonesia. We have Fernanda Teixiera, who will be talking about example from Brazil, and Bibi Linden, who will be presenting her research from South Africa. However, we know that primates are not the only arboreal animals that need solutions, so we hope that these solutions can be applicable in other contexts. And as I saw from a lot of the photos that those of you in the audience contributed, there are projects from all around the world, and it would be great to hear more about them too. So we're hoping to provide opportunities to do that. I'll talk about that in just a second, but to start, I wanted to show you this slide here. See my slides forward. This demonstrates the registrants from that we've had for this seminar. We've had over 540 registrants for this seminar. It's so exciting to see from 52 countries. Fernanda made this really cool slide showing the flags of all those countries. So in case you're feeling alone sitting in your basement today, as I might be doing, please know that you're surrounded by many colleagues who are interested in this topic. At this very moment, we have nearly 120 people connected to the webinar. So as I said, because we're not just interested in bridges for animals, we're also interested in building connections amongst researchers. We'd like to make this webinar as interactive as possible, and we're going to do that with through various means. First of all, we're going to have polling questions throughout the seminar, just so that you all can see what the other audience members think and what they might be interested in. We'll just have a few of those, and we'll be able to look at the results all together. And also at the end, during the presentation, please submit your questions that you may have for the presenter who's speaking or for any of the other presenters. We'll have a question session after each talk, and then we're going to have a general question session at the very end, so that we'll be able to hopefully get to all those questions. But we'll also be having a bit of an after party by way of breakout sessions at the end of the meeting. And during the seminar, you'll receive a separate link to a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar, in which we'll be able to all go to breakout rooms. So after the session ends, you can go to that link, and then we'll break out into 3 different rooms with each of the speakers, so that you can ask questions face to face, so to speak. We would like to tell you about some other opportunities that we have designed for all of you researchers and people interested in canopy bridges to connect to each other. First of all, just yesterday, Fernanda created a Facebook page called Canopy Bridges Around the World. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, so hopefully you will all be able to see the name of that Facebook page. And on that Facebook page, if you'd like to like it, then you can share images from your projects. You can share thoughts about your projects, anything that you'd like to share. It would be great to see. And the more we talk about this topic, the more I think we can learn from each other about what is working and what's not working. A second thing that we will be doing in the coming months is we would like to survey those of you who are doing research on canopy bridges to see what's working for you and what's not working for you. And so Fernanda and I will be working on that survey in the coming months. And then finally, we're excited to announce that we are going to submit a proposal for a special issue of Folia Primatologica on canopy bridges. There's so many cool canopy bridge studies out there, and I think many of you have not necessarily had the opportunity to publish them, because many of them are not published. So with this special issue, we'd like to provide that opportunity to publish, and we will be accepting, or we would like to receive brief publications. If it's just a brief report on a small study that you did, that's very welcome. And then more full-length submissions are also welcome. So if you're interested in doing that, please email me or Fernanda after the session, and we'd love to involve you in that process. Okay, let's see. I've got all my notes here, just making sure I'm going to say everything I want to say. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick things off with our first polling question. I know a lot of you out there are involved in Canopy Bridge projects, so we were just curious, and we thought other researchers might be curious to see how many of you are. So please feel free to go ahead and answer these polling questions. Have you previously or are you currently involved in a Canopy Bridge project? You can answer, yes, I'm currently involved in one. Yes, I was previously involved in one. No, but I'm planning one for the future. Or no, I'm just interested in the topic. Okay, we're getting lots of different answers. It seems like almost everyone has voted. It's really cool to see. If you choose not to vote, you can go ahead and close the poll without voting. Okay, getting up to almost full participation. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share the results. Can you see our results now? I think you can. So as you can see, we have 16% of the audience, 15 people are currently involved in a Canopy Bridge project, with 4 of you previously involved. Then another 14 are planning them for the future. I hope that the information you received today will help you plan for that project. And then 63 of you are merely interested in the topic, and I hope you will help us spread the word for this topic, on this topic for others who may be interested. So now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit, so to speak, I would like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Anna Nekaris. She is a professor of anthropology and primate conservation at Oxford Brookes University. She is also co-editor-in-chief of Folia Primatologica and a member of the IUCN Specialist Group. Since 2011, she's been leading a continuous study on slow lorises and other nocturnal animals in an agricultural landscape in West Java, Indonesia. I'm extremely excited about this project because it's providing a solution not only for wildlife, but also for people. It's a really, really cool example. So welcome, Anna, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. I guess I can just start sharing my screen now because I'm a co-host, so I'm going to try. So I'll do it this way. So I hope, Tremy, can you tell me if you see that? I'm so sorry, the postman came this very second and my dog's barking.
It's okay.
But you can enjoy
it.
Instead of hearing my dog's bark, you can enjoy this young male Javan slow loris using one of our canopy bridges. And I'm going to be talking today about Javan slow lorises, which are a critically endangered primate found only on the island of Indonesia, and as well as some other animals that they're sharing their habitats with. So, oh gosh, the dog suddenly went really crazy. He's been completely quiet, but that's the advantage of all of this Zoom meetings. So I would like first to thank my team. I'm actually speaking to you today from Oxford, and it's almost exactly a year to today that I was able to visit Indonesia due to the pandemic. But my wonderful team in Indonesia has been able to work continuously throughout the time. And this bridge study that we have been doing since 2014, actually initially, is still ongoing. And all their names are there, and they've contributed incredibly to the data you're going to see today. And I'm very, very grateful to them all. And my website is there as well. And there's a lot more information on this project, as well as links to a lot of the articles I'm going to show today, most of which are open access. So you can read them all. So we're working in Java. It is, it's the most populated island of Indonesia. It's the island that people kind of skip through to go see the real forest because there is less than 5% of forest left. And when we think of needing bridges over roads and other infrastructures, it seems very important. But if you look at the pictures of the landscape in which we are working, it's incredibly modified for humans with a lot of different crops. And the main trees you see for slow lorises are these really thin trees that occur on the edges of these fields, which are about a hectare each, and they have to cross across crops in order to get to the other side. Despite the fact that this landscape is so disturbed, we have several types of carnivores, including leopard cats, leopards, we have ferret badgers, we have linsangs. So we have a lot of arboreal animals. We have feral dogs, which are a threat to slow lorises, and we have human hunters. The other species I'm going to be talking a lot about today is the Javan palm civet. And for both these species, they're heavily hunted by humans, and they tend to be hunted in landscapes like these where humans can easily catch them. So in fact, humans are their major predators. So given the context of this project, I started this project in 2011 and started working with the community and radio coloring lorises in particular since 2012. And so there was a lot in place to try to understand ways to help conserve a critically endangered species. We've done a lot of conservation education, and one of those particular education programs involved building bridges to get the community positive about the potential of having bridges on their landscape. And this came from the fact that one of our adult females, she's called Tere, which means speedy in Sundanese. And this is actually an artist illustration of Tere. She used a waterline bridge that that particular farmer used to irrigate his land. And so she's used that since the beginning of the study. We've seen her on there since 2011. And we decided this might be a potential way to increase the landscape for animals. So we worked with children in our local nature club. We called it Building Bridges for Slow Loris Conservation. In addition to working with the children, we worked with their parents. So every parent of a child in Nature Club got a photograph framed of one of the lorises that lived on their land. They got a t-shirt featuring an artist drawing of the loris that lived on their land. And we also did some structural equation modeling of children and their parents before and after this education program. And we found that the community started to get a lot of positive emotion towards the animals, especially in our case, where we're studying a long-term population where we have known individuals. They really got attracted to the loris's name, the loris's family, and the fact that they lived in family groups. They are not solitary animals. So this was something that was very interesting and gave us a pathway into asking people to put these bridges on their land. So here are the animals in that context, the Javan slow loris. It's a very interesting animal. They live in unimale, unifemale social systems with 1 to 4 offspring. They are the only venomous primates. They're a really distinct slow loris species found only on the island of Java. They rarely occur in protected areas. They're an edge species, so they actually do well in human landscapes when they're not hunted for the pet trade. The Javan palm civet, it's almost the opposite. It's currently considered least concern. However, they were recently elevated from a different species, and they're being annihilated for something called Civet coffee, which is a luxury drink that's sold, for example, to tourists on the island of Bali or in the airports when you come and go from Indonesia. And the idea is that in the wild, these civets would have eaten coffee berries and defecated them, and you pick the coffee out of their poop. But instead, these guys are caged and force-fed coffee till they die. And it's a luxury coffee industry that brings in a lot of money. But they're really important in the local farming landscape. They eat pests, and they actually disperse coffee plants. So they're a really useful animal. So we happen to be tracking them as well. They're the first paper we wrote about bridges back in 2014, because we also recognize they use these water lines frequently. So the method of building these bridges, it was pretty simple because we looked at what farmers were already doing. They had hose pipe, which you can see here, and you can see the kind of perspective of the size that goes across the landscape. And here you can see it going from across the landscape. And so what we had to do was work with farmers to get them to agree to have this water hose going across their landscape. In some cases, from a water source, it could actually bring water to one farm. In other cases, it had to pass over a farmer's farm and then have its endpoint at another farm. And so we had to make solutions of how we might be able to deliver water to both farms. And what we did was we put camera traps on either side of our bridges to be able to record which animals were using them. We wanted to do passive microchip ID devices because all of our animals have microchips, but this was not possible because they had to be connected to car batteries to keep them operated, and they would have been stolen in our area because car batteries are very, very desirable. This is the actual design. So we did try two types of bridges. Our water hose bridges cost about $250 each. And that, in perspective, the average salary in our area is about $70 a month. So it was a kind of positive thing for a farmer to have on their land. But we also had these very cheap sort of rubber hose pipes, which we could just put between trees. They could be a little bit longer than the water lines, because the water lines actually have to carry water. I'm just gonna have to move the pictures. Can I move them? So if you look, our area is incredibly damaged. So our average height of these bridges was about 4 to 5 meters high. Our average canopy is only about 9 meters high. And our average length in both cases is about 50 meters long. So it's going across the edges of fields to get from one side of the field to the next. But the maximum water hose pipe we have is 75 meters long. So here's some details of the bridge use. So these are data that are coming from 2017 to 2019. We are still collecting data, but these are data we published in the journal Diversity. And we found that using the camera traps, lorises were seen to use the water lines over 1,000 times and the rubber lines around 350 times. And they started using them only 10 to 15 days after the installation. So they were very, very happy to start using them. They're an incredibly adaptable species. The civets were a little bit more cautious. They didn't use them till 36 days until after installation. And they never used the cheap rubber water lines, or sorry, the rubber bridges, but they used the water lines 938 times. And here you can see the accumulation from when the animals started using them to the number of crossings over that 2-year period for both species. We recorded at least 19 other species using the water lines 260 times. We had some migratory bird species. We had kingfishers, freckle-breasted woodpeckers. We also had a couple of nocturnal species, including Javan scopes, owl, and nightjars. So it was a good place also for animals to perch and for these bird species to perch and be able to feed in the farmers' fields, which also had an important pest control element. For the ecology of these bridges, we monitored the slow lorises, which are all radio colored, 3 months before the installation of bridges and 3 months after in their home range. And we found that lorises increased their home range size significantly after the installation of bridges. And you could see where the bridges are, and in some cases where the lorises are using more of their home range. We also found that the bridges made them use the ground significantly less. And obviously for an animal, a slow loris does not leap. So they have to have continuous canopy, and going to the ground is really dangerous. So that was an important thing for them to be able to be elevated. And we also found that they had access to feeding trees they did not have regular access to before. That was not statistically significant. It was almost statistically significant, but a couple of years on and with more data, we really see these animals expanding their ability to use the bridges. When we look at some aspects of their ecological use of the bridges, we use generalized additive models for these figures. And actually, interestingly, for the lorises, very little affected their use of the bridges. They were happy to use the bridges almost all the time. But here you can see in the drier period, they use the bridges a little bit less when it was warmer in the drier season. They actually go into torpor more in that time. And sorry, that's on this side. And it's a bit colder in our drier season. And yeah, and so they reduce their activity in general. They have less available resources. They rely almost exclusively on gum and insects during that period, and their home range size gets smaller. So they're using the bridges less, but they don't really mind how humid it is, how bright the moon it is, how wet it is. They are happy to use these bridges. I actually asked my team as well to just provide some insight from their perspective of being out there every single day, including, this is Esther, one of my research assistants, Nabil, my other main Indonesian research assistant, and Katie, who's the current Indonesian project lead. And some of the things they said they really thought were amazing about the ecology of the bridges was here you see actually a civet and a loris having a face down on a bridge. And people assume civets are predators of lorises. We've never seen a civet eat or attack a loris, but they basically had to back up and avoid each other on the bridge. So we also get a lot of social behavior. This is right about waking up in the evening, where you see a baby loris on its mother. Earlier, you saw a family of 3 lorises using the bridge at the same time. And here you see 2 civets using the bridge at the same time. The team said that they really found that the animals weren't afraid to use them, and they were valuable for helping them find food partners and resting places. But they suggested maybe aerial predators might be able to get lorises on the bridge, or actually civets as well, but their main diurnal aerial predator is the Javan hawk eagle, which is diurnal, and they don't use the bridges during the day. When I asked them about bridges in the community, this also includes work we did interviewing all of the farmers about their attitudes towards the bridges. They said there really weren't that many negatives. Increasing the water supply was important, especially in the dry season. And I should say, we provided these bridges to the farmers, and we agreed to, if they had a waterline bridge, we agreed to do upkeep of these bridges. And what's interesting is if a rubber bridge falls, the farmers don't tell us about it because it doesn't have any advantage to them. Whereas if a water line bridge falls, they immediately tell us because they would like to have it fixed. One of the disadvantages is as my team said, maybe people won't want to increase the natural canopy because they get such a benefit from the waterline bridges. They'd rather have water lines than trees. If the water line actually falls during heavy winds, it can damage the crops. And we have had farmers be jealous that other farmers have the bridges. So maybe they get stolen, and we have had a bridge stolen. They're incredibly heavy. It's a really big task to steal a bridge. So I'm actually amazed that actually happened. But in fact, one of the things we did to mitigate this was have a community fund for other projects that could be done instead of bridges, or giving farmers bridges in areas that were not ecologically important to the lorises. So further down in the community, they could still have a bridge. And in general, one thing that the team thought was that the project can help other Indonesian conservationists understand the needs of Javan slow lorises, which are often an underlooked species. So that's the end of my talk. I would like to thank my sponsors, which are mainly zoos and small conservation charities who have helped this project now enter its 10th year, and the groups that we are partners with, including the Persimmon Tag in European Association of Zoos and Aquaria. We're also now certified wildlife friendly. And this bridge project really helped us to get the confidence of farmers to have a wildlife friendly farming certification. And yeah, if you are interested in our project, you can visit us on all these social medias. You can visit our Etsy shop. And you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. So I'm going to now stop sharing my screen and give you guys time for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for your amazing presentation. And we have some questions for you. So the first one is from Krista. She's asking, which individuals are willing to use the bridges first or try the bridges? In other words, it is related to sex, age, or some other characteristic, or it is just random?
It is just random. We did put that factor into our models, and there was no significant result. The only thing we found is a full crossing of a bridge going from one end. So a lot of the animals enter the bridge and they kind of go halfway and they turn around in the first days. And the youngsters take a little bit longer. So they aren't as agile as the adults, but they get more confidence if they follow their parents across the bridge. So the only difference, but that is still not statistically significant, but from an anecdotal perspective, they are a bit more shy.
Okay. The second is, what about owls as predators?
The owls we have in our field site, well, we actually have about 5 species of owls. The only one that could probably eat a slow loris is the barn owl, and it could probably only eat a baby slow loris. And the baby slow lorises don't cross the bridge on their own. They're usually attached to the mother. So it's more the diurnal eagles that would be a real predator. It is possible, and it is possible that they would be nervous of them, but they even share sleeping sites with the small owlets, which are the more common owls at our field site.
Okay. The third question is, what other types of anthropogenic landscapes would be suitable for slow loris bridges?
Well, one really interesting case that we had is I work also with a project in Thailand called Love Wildlife. And they are working on slow lorises in many different types of habitats, and one of them are eco hotels. And so they ended up putting a bridge across a road from a forest where lorises were regularly occurring into the eco hotel grounds where they have many natural trees. And they include, and the lorises readily and quickly use those bridges. They use rope bridges, and they included, how do you say, laminated cards on the trees with the bridges for the tourists going to the hotels to be able to monitor and see if the lorises were using the bridges. So that's one really great way that it can be used, is in kind of private landscapes where you can monitor and keep these less expensive, less sturdy types of bridges.
One more, has there been any issues with falls? Do the animals recover quickly and have a way to get back up?
Incredibly, we've never seen a loris fall from the bridge. We've seen lorises fall from other places, like from trees. And in fact, they fall pretty often, like more often than you would think. Usually when they're playing or fighting, they fall. They also could fall during heavy wind. And what's interesting about slow lorises is they're used regularly in traditional medicines because they are called the animal that can always fall from a tree but never break a bone. And they curl into a ball, and when they fall, they go rolling, and they really seem to be relatively resistant to falls. So we've not seen one fall from a bridge, but they would fall into like a nice soft bed of crops if they did fall.
We have much more questions. I think we have enough time to answer them all. Is planting climbing trees, does it make a positive effect for animals to use the bridges, like lianas?
Yes, so actually we have an agreement with farmers that every bridge we put up, we plant certain types of trees. And so we have certain fast growing trees that also serve a soil fertility function that can go on the edges of bridges that are also loris food trees. And it actually makes the edges of those bridges much more luxurious and more safe, I guess. So I would say that helps the animals to want to go onto those bridges, is they're not going from some skinny, sparse tree. There are other fast growing plants that are grown on the edges of those trees. And we give every farmer the option of trees that they want that give them benefits as well. So either soil and nitrogen fixing or fast growing. And for every fast growing nitrogen fixing tree, we also give them a timber tree that grows a lot longer and is more expensive and is less useful, but very useful for the farmer. So it's like a deal to make with the farmers.
Anna, there's a lot of more questions for you, but we don't have more time, unfortunately. But in outbreak sessions, I think you can be able to answer all the other questions. So now we jump to the second polling question. You're going to receive the polling question now in your screen. Let me see if I see it. Okay. If you are involved in a project, it's purely an applied conservation project, or are you testing a research question? So you can answer A, strictly applied and no plans to publish results. It's a strictly applied project and I plan to publish. It's an experimental and I will publish. Experimental but not yet published. Oh, I am not involved in a project. So you're going to have some seconds to answer this second polling question. I think the results is super interesting to know about the audience. So let's see. There are more people that is not involved in a project, but I'm sure that after this seminar, we're going to have more projects all around the world. We have 15% of the audience that does a strictly applied project and plan to publish. This is very good. And you can publish your result now in the special issue of Folia Primatologica, as Tremy just announced. Okay, let's share the results. The majority is not involved in a project, but there are more people who has strictly applied projects and plan to publish the results. This is very good. Okay, closing this, the polling questions. Now I'm going to introduce my colleague, my Brazilian colleague, Fernanda Teixiera. And Fernanda Teixiera is a postdoctoral fellow based in southern Brazil at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Her current research focuses on the effects of roads on wildlife, mitigation effectiveness, and the improvement of study designs in environmental assessments. She also has experience with howler monkeys conservation in a peri-urban environment as a member of the Urban Monkeys Program, a pioneer group in installing canopy rope bridges in Brazil. So Fernanda, you can share your screen now.
Thank you. Here. Let me just share it here. Is it there? I think.
Yes, go ahead.
I think everything's okay. Okay. So thank you, Fer. I'm really happy, really excited to be part of this seminar. And I'm going to present a case study on canopy rope bridges for howler monkeys in a peri-urban landscape in Brazil. So this case study that I will present is part of the work done by the Urban Monkeys Program in southern Brazil, which is a group that works with the conservation of the brown howler monkeys and is located at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. So we are located in southern Brazil. This species occurs in the Atlantic forest in the coast of Brazil, and it's a species that is currently vulnerable to extinction in southern Brazil, and we work at the peri-urban region of the city of Porto Alegre, which is a large city of 1.5 million inhabitants. But in this peri-urban area, there is a protected area, a biological reserve, where these howlers occur. And they also occur in this neighborhood, so they use the orchards and the trees and these forest patches that are intersected with the houses in this region. So the landscape is kind of like shown in this picture. There are houses. The animals use the roofs of the houses to move and to move to among these trees and between forest patches. They also use power lines for movement. They use that quite often to cross the streets or to even to move along a street and reach some specific tree on the other side, or sometimes they even prefer to use the cables compared to some trees. It seems easier. They're using these cables. And since 1999, the Urban Monkeys Program has been recording cases of hazards on the power lines, and these animals are being mutilated or dead by these hazards. And so there was not a systematic monitoring during these 22 years, but for many times, like for our participation with the community and involvement with the community, there are hundreds of cases of accidents involving these animals. And besides the hazards on power lines, there are also road kills and dog attacks. They are also very common because these animals have to move on the ground between the forest fragments. So this is also a common situation in this area. And so in order to decrease the cases of accidents and to avoid that the animals would go to the floor to move, since 1999, this group started installing rope bridges. So the first rope bridge was installed in 1999, and it was composed of 2 parallel ropes in one specific place, only one bridge. And although there was not systematic monitoring of this case, there was no record of use of this model of bridge. So we replaced this bridge by a bridge in the format of a ship ladder. That is the model that we have been using since then with some adaptations. So here is the design of the bridge. We use usually rubber hoses as steps and four ropes, two parallel ropes on the extremities and two ropes that cross in between steps and form this axis. And this seems to be an interesting design, although we need to test other designs, and I will talk about this more at the end. So this is the design that we have been using. We already modified a bit the sizes, but we started with 50 centimeters for the steps and 80 centimeters between steps. But we also used in some cases, steps made of wood and not of rubber. So this is something that remains to be tested. And we had the support of the municipal environmental agency and also from the energy company to install these rope bridges. And they are not expensive. So they cost around $100 for the material of the bridge. This does not consider the installation costs. And if you have to, for example, install a pole, a specific pole for this, the cost can increase. But in this neighborhood, since it's a peri-urban area, small neighborhood, it's not a highway or a larger road. The rope bridges are fixed on trees, on top of trees. So this makes it way simpler. Now I just remember I forgot to mention something before. On the hazards on power lines, in 2001, our group made a legal complaint to the public ministry about the electric hazards, and the electric energy was obliged to insulate some of the cables in the priority areas where there was these cases of hazards. So this was also something very important to decrease the number of accidents and mitigate this impact. So the monitoring of the rope bridges, we did systematic monitoring for 15 months. This was between 2008 and 2009. We monitored using camera traps during 7 days per month during these 15 months. And we also had citizen science monitoring involving the local residents of this community. So here we have one of the local residents that is part of this monitoring, and each local resident received during this period this form where they would include the date that they would cite the crossings, how many animals, the time, and information. For example, if they are going to eat a specific fruit or something like that. And we visit these local residents systematically during this period. And after this period, we had some episodic monitorings with camera traps and also the monitorings with the local residents, but this was not systematic and long as this first monitoring that we carried out. So the results from this first systematic monitoring are published, and they are very interesting because we did not expect to see other species using these canopy bridges. So besides the brown howler monkeys, we also recorded the white-eared opossum using, and also the porcupines. And this was the records with the camera traps. You can see these odd pictures is because we were using analog camera traps. It was a project with very tight budget and 12 years ago. And when we compare the results from the camera trap monitoring and the citizen science monitoring, these results are very interesting because some people might expect the camera traps are more reliable, but in many cases we monitored 6 bridges during this period. These were the number. Now we have more bridges installed, but at this time we had 6. And the local residents recorded the use by the howler monkeys in more bridges than the camera traps. So 2 bridges had records of howlers using only by the local residents, and they had photos and video shootings of the animals using the bridges. So this was very interesting because the citizen science monitoring was very reliable and had almost more interesting results than the camera traps. And we had a few problems with the camera traps. One was stolen, as it was expected, and also problems with them being analogic at that time. But at the same time, the camera traps recorded the porcupine and the white-eared opossum, and that were not often recorded by the local residents. There was only one case of a record of a white-eared opossum by the local residents. And this is probably because these species are nocturnal and the brown howler is diurnal, and so this should make a difference in the monitoring by the local residents. So we currently have 10 rope bridges installed. We added new ones based on, so the bridges were installed based on cases of accidents, but also in places where we knew that the animals, the brown howlers were attempting to cross or were crossing on the ground. And we are currently looking for funding to resume a new systematic monitoring of these new bridges. So one question that is important to be asked and remain to be investigated is this the best design? We don't know. So this design works for howlers because they use the bridges. So we have lots of records of them using the bridges, but this model is being replicated in different places, and we don't know how it's performing for different species, and also if different models of canopy bridges would be better considering different species. So Tremy mentioned early about non-primates also using, so we had the white-eared possum and the porcupine that have different types of locomotion. They are using these bridges, but maybe small rodents that could be using these different designs are not being contemplated by these designs. So here I brought this as an afterthought for us to discuss how different designs can be tested and how they are important to be tested for different species. So we need to consider the size of the species as in this example, but we also need to consider the type of locomotion. Species that don't use the forelimbs to move, these might not be a good design. But for howlers, this seems to be an interesting designs because it's interesting to see in this picture that they use the steps, but they also use the axe in the middle, in between the steps to move. So they put their hands in both, and so they seem to be well suited for that. And a second issue that it's important to discuss is if the canopy bridges are effective or not. So we recorded the use of the overpasses, and this is the first step for them to be effective. If they are not used, they cannot. They don't have the potential to be effective. but we need to go further than this. So we need, for example, to think why they were installed. In our case, we still record cases of conflict. So here, as an example, in the past 2.5 years, there were 49 cases of conflicts with these animals that were mutilated, had hazards on power lines, or were road killed or attacked by dogs, in a 10-kilometer radius from the reserve, the protected area. So these accidents are still occurring. We don't have systematic monitoring to be able to compare the trends in the number of accidents through time, but they are still happening. So we still have a lot of work to do. So what we need to think is, what's the goal of these structures? Is it to reduce mortality? We don't know if the mortality has reduced, but there is still mortality to be mitigated. But another goal would be to increase connectivity. So we have to think if we are talking about daily movements or dispersal events. And so these are things that should be investigated in this population. Apparently, we see the animals using the bridges within their home ranges. So the same group seems to be using very often a bridge, but this is our observation. We don't have specific measures to answer these questions. And as a closing remark, I'd like to also emphasize that this project has a lot of involvement with the community. So here are a few pictures of the bridges being built by local people with the involvement of the people from the Urban Monkeys program. So there's a lot of involvement with the community, which is really nice. And a lot of people see the bridges as part of their environment and as their howlers that are in their neighbors in their area. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. What a wonderful presentation, and thank you for addressing the connections with the community too. I think it's a really important part, both in your study and in Anna's study. The community members really seem to be the key to making a project effective. We have a bunch of questions from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead with a couple of them. First of all, what is the lifespan of the bridges that you've designed? And are there any maintenance? Is any maintenance or replacement necessary? This person observes that they can probably deteriorate over time, which is something I've wondered about myself.
Yes, so the bridges there are some bridges that are installed now that are there for almost 20 years. From 2001, we installed 3 bridges. Then in 2003, we installed 3 more. That were the 6 that I monitored in 2008. And then now we have more recent ones. So these, they have occasional repairs. One of the bridges was stolen, as similar to Anna's case. And so here in the back picture, you can see like these axes are the thing that at the beginning we used to make them, they were more fragile, the way they were sewed there. And then now we are putting plastic tags that also with time and sun can break, and then these need to be replaced. But they are there for almost 20 years with very few maintenance.
Wow, that's great to hear. I know this is one of the, let's say, oldest published examples. So I think that your project has a lot to offer over with regard to long-term lifespan of materials. One quick question about, you mentioned spider monkeys. Are there spider monkeys in the area? Do they cross these bridges? I know
No, there are only in this neighborhood. There are only howler monkeys, but in the same city there are capuchin monkeys. But I was talking generally, thinking of the replication of these designs in other areas, because there are a few colleagues from the Urban Monkeys programs that are now working in the Brazilian Center of Primatology from the government, and they are implementing this type of bridges in pipelines or in other areas with other species. So they are starting to adapt the size of the steps, but this needs to be tested. So they are empirically modifying, but we need systematic testing of this design for different species.
Okay, cool. I know that there's an example from Ecuador in which there are spider monkeys crossing, and this has been one of the question from an audience member. I think also from Costa Rica there may be some examples, so we can try and share those afterward. Another question that we have is how were the rope bridges attached to the trees on either end of them, I guess.
So we choose forgot the name of a part of the tree, like a branch.
The trunk branch, okay.
a branch that was strong enough, not too thin, and then just put the ropes there.
Okay.
And then we use those trucks that I showed in the pictures to reach the trees, but that was, so in this area, there's another, there are 3 other bridges that were installed from one of the members of the group in another area. And this is part of a different project that was related to urbanization of an area. And this was a mitigation strategy that they hired to put there. And so he installed 3 bridges. And then in this case, they had to install the poles using this, the same poles that are used for the power lines.
Mm-hmm.
They installed it and put the bridges.
Okay.
So this makes it more expensive, but it's a larger road as well and has more traffic.
Right. I guess it is good though that you're along a road so you can use trucks to access. For our natural bridges, we didn't have that choice as much, but roads are obviously a bigger problem anyway, so
yeah,
they're more important. I'm going to ask you one last question and then we'll move on to the final presentation. So howler monkeys have been targeted for hunting due to yellow fever. This person says, I'm curious to know your perspectives on the current situation regarding this problem, including mitigation strategies, and would the bridges make them more visible to hunters?
So in this neighborhood specifically, I think the involvement of the urban monkeys program with the community is very strong. So there are recent residents that are not very connected to the neighborhood, but a lot of people that live there, they are there because of the nature, because it's far away from downtown, and they like to be there because of these nature aspects. And so many people see the howlers as their friends, as my howlers that's come to my garden and on my trees. So from this perspective, it's very nice in this local community, but of course there are people concerned with there are a lot of misinformation about the yellow fever. So we also worked on that a few years ago, especially in 2007, there was a huge outbreak of yellow fever. I think it was in 2007. As long as I remember. And then we started to work more with the community, informing them that the monkeys do not spread yellow fever, that they are sentinels that will tell us when yellow fever is coming. And so this was a strong work with the community. And in these communities, the cases of like people mutilating animals are rarer. They can happen, but they occur less often. But for sure, this is a problem in many regions where people hunt these animals, thinking that they are bringing yellow fever to the communities.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you so much, Fernanda. There have been other questions for you, and I hope that we'll either have time at the end or we'll have them in the breakout session. So thanks so much for this.
Thank you for having me.
For your example that's been example for so many people for so many years. Okay, wonderful. Now we're going to have our third presentation from Bibi Linden. I'm sorry, excuse me. We're going to have our next polling question. So here is our next polling question for you all to tell us about the animals that you have been targeting with your Canopy Bridge project. So if you're involved or hope to carry out a Canopy Bridge project, which are the target taxonomic groups for your study? And you should be able to choose more than one example. So we know we've talked a lot about primates today, but here we have apes, monkeys, and prosimians as choices, but then we know that rodents, marsupials can benefit from canopy bridges, and also carnivores such as kinkajous, olingos, and then pilosa, sloths, anteaters, and we had a tamandua visiting our bridges frequently. And then we also know that non-mammals can benefit from bridges, things like reptiles. So we have a lot of responses already. That's great to see. And I think we will go ahead and stop right here so everyone can see the results. I don't know if you can see the results. It says it's not able to share them, but I can tell you that 60 people responded that monkeys are one of the targets of their studies. 12 said that apes are. That's really cool to see so many ape studies. 9 studies target prosimians, 13 target rodents, 15 marsupials, 17 carnivores, 21 target sloths and anteaters. That's really amazing. I'm surprised to see that. And 11 target reptiles. Very, very cool. So as you can see, we've got a lot of diversity, even more than I expected, in those animals that are benefiting from canopy bridges globally. Okay, so thanks for your answers on that polling question. And now, I'm sorry, Bibi, we will start with your presentation. Bibi is in South Africa, so her presentation is a recording. But excuse me, I'm gonna share her introduction here. So her internet connection is a little bit unreliable, so she preferred to record, but she'll be available live afterward for questions. So Bibi has been researching various aspects of Simango monkey ecology, behavior, and conservation for the past 15 years. And she's currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Venda in South Africa. Additionally, she manages the academic program at the Lajuma Research Center, overseeing undergraduate and postgraduate biological research and educational programs aimed at informing conservation of the unique biodiversity of the area in which she lives. So Bibi, we're very excited to hear your presentation today and look forward to questions afterward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bibi Linden, and I'm going to present a paper that we published last year on designing canopy bridges for arboreal genons to mitigate road collisions. First, I would like to give you a brief introduction on primate roadkills in general. The construction of roads causes habitat loss and fragmentation all over the planet. And roads are a cause of mortality and a barrier to gene flow between populations, and they can thus increase local extinction probability. It is estimated that 13% of primate species are impacted by linear infrastructure globally, and there's still a great need for more research on primate road fatalities and mitigation, and on experimental research of how to design bridges for primate roadkill mitigation. We became aware of the impact of roads on primate populations while studying the Simango monkeys in South Africa. They're the only forest-dwelling Cercopithecus monkey in southern Africa, and they belong to the highly arboreal taxon-rich species group of genons, which constitute about half of Central Africa's forest primate fauna. And due to that, we consider the Simango monkey an ideal model species for our study. There are 3 different subspecies of Simango monkeys in South Africa, and the one in our study area is listed as endangered. You can see on the map on the right that the study area is based in the far northern parts of South Africa in the Soutpansberg mountain range. Forests of the Soutpansberg are highly fragmented, as you can see on the picture on the right. Due to 2 main factors. One is naturally a more slow process due to paleoclimatic fluctuations, but then the other one, which is of far more interest to us, is the anthropogenic habitat fragmentations, which is much faster. While doing a large-scale distribution survey of Simango monkeys across the mountain range, we became aware that Semengo monkeys were road-killed in a particular area between the towns of Louis Trichardt and Thohoyandou. As you can see on the map here at the bottom left, this is the study area with a road network and the high-risk area of where the Semengo monkeys would get killed. We then embarked on a survey and used the public to help us record as many Semengo monkey roadkills as possible. So we used local newspapers and we asked people to please contact us as soon as they find a road-killed individual so that we could come collect the GPS point and determine the age, sex class of the individual. From this survey, we determined that between 2012 and 2021, 21 individual Semengo monkeys got killed in 2 different hotspots along the road I just showed you. One roadkill incident was particularly sad as 2 females and their infants were killed at the same time. And we also unfortunately had found an orphaned Semengo monkey of the mother that was being killed by a road collision, which was then handed over to a rehabilitation center. Interesting from our data collection was when we put our GPS points on aerial imagery is that adult male Semengo monkeys, the yellow points, were found in areas that were quite unusual and unexpected, meaning areas that did not necessarily have indigenous forest on either side of the road. Sometimes it was areas where there were actually monocultures of blue gum, so of plantations. Sometimes, as you can see in image A1, just a line of trees. In that case, it was also blue gum trees leading up to the road where these male Semengo monkeys would then get killed. While collecting actual roadkill data, we designed an experiment to determine if Semengo monkeys would accept artificial crossing structures and also to test different bridge designs. Here we used 2 habituated troops of Semengos at a local research facility. On the map on the right, you can see the farm road network, and in blue and red, you can see different road crossing points of the Semengo monkeys. We chose 25 crossing points, and on each crossing point, we erected 2 different bridges. The designs we used and tested were a solid pole design and a rope bridge design. We were further interested to see how canopy cover across the road could influence the way the Semengo monkeys would cross a road. And some of the crossing points in the experiment had open canopy cover, others had partial canopy cover, and some of the crossing points were fully covered under canopy. The actual data collection on the Semengo monkeys' behavior when crossing the road at the research facility was done by direct observations. We had observers standing on the roads waiting until the Semengo monkeys started crossing the road and then noting down which way the Semengo monkeys would choose for the crossing, either the ground, the canopy, or the bridge. And through that data collection, we were able to determine if the Semengo monkeys preferred one of the 2 bridge designs and if the vegetation cover across the road had some kind of effect on the choice of how the monkeys would cross the road. Coming to the main results of our experiment. The first analysis we did was to find out if the Semengo monkeys showed a preference between the pole and the rope bridges. And here we found that there was a significant preference of the Semengo monkeys towards the pole bridges. On the 2 images to the left, you can see the Semengo monkeys using on the top the rope bridge and at the bottom the pole bridge. And what is interesting to note here is that when the Semengo monkeys were using the rope bridges, they were rather awkwardly balancing on the 2 outer strands of the rope bridge rather than using the cross pieces. And this gave us a little bit of an indication that a bridge design that resembles the most natural way of how the primates are probably moving around in the tree canopy is likely the more successful one when it comes to animals accepting an artificial crossing structure. In the second part of the analysis, we were interested to see what effects the different canopy covers had on how the monkeys were choosing to cross the roads, and also if ground crossings can be reduced if there's an artificial canopy crossing structure available. Here in that graph, we've got the crossing way, which is either the tree, ground, or the bridge, and then the different canopy covers, covered, open, and partially. And we use that data set in a generalized linear mixed model to derive our results. So the first important finding was that in comparison, the Simango monkeys would always choose to cross the road more often on a bridge than compared to crossing the road on the ground. And this is very important, as our general aim, of course, is, if we want to mitigate road kills, that we reduce the incidence of primates choosing to cross the road on the ground. The second interesting result was that the Simango monkeys preferred crossing on bridges under open and partial canopy cover. So as soon as the road where animals are getting killed has got no real canopy cover over it, then these artificial crossing structures do aid them to cross the road safely. And again, rather unsurprisingly, but still important, is that as soon as the canopy was closed over the roads, the Simango monkeys would choose to cross within the canopy. If you apply that to roads where the actual road crossings and road kills are happening, then it's important for road developers, when new roads are, for example, created, to see if one cannot have some sections of roads where canopy cover can actually remain intact in order to allow arboreal species, not just primates, but also others, to continue to cross roads without getting killed on those. In order to determine if artificial crossing structures implemented for Simango monkeys could aid other arboreal species as well, we undertook a camera trap survey on our bridge stations at the research center. And we were very pleased to see that all 5 primate species in South Africa could potentially benefit from artificial crossing structures. That includes the vervet monkey, picture A, the baboon, picture F, the lesser bush baby, picture G, and the greater bush baby in picture J. Further, we found that rock hyraxes, reptiles, here a gecko, and 3 different raptor species were also utilizing the canopy bridges that we installed for Simango monkeys. And again, all of these other arboreal species preferred the pole bridge over the rope bridge. To wrap up, the key findings of our study were that the canopy cover across roads influences how the Simango monkeys choose to cross the road, that canopy overpasses are effective to reduce ground crossings, that solid pole bridges are clearly preferred over rope bridges, and that other species could potentially benefit from artificial crossing structures. Going into the future, the next steps are the construction and testing of a prototype bridge at the research station, the engagement with road agencies and road developers to go forward to get road crossings implemented on the actual hotspots, and to continue public engagement and roadkill data collection. We have a very long list of acknowledgements, but in short, I would like to thank our field assistants, the general public, Durham University, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, the Riverside Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, and our 2 local newspapers. Further, we would like to thank our various funders for making this project possible. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone here today for your attention.
Okay, Bibi, great presentation. Thank you very much. And we have some questions for you. The first one is from Mark Thurber. He is asking, the pole design makes sense, but were you able to span wide roads? Also, do you have problems with predation on wider crossings, and perhaps a ladder structure might provide more protection from predation?
Yeah, this is the one issue, because we tested those bridges at the research facility where the roads were 2.5 to 3 meters wide. The next step that we have to take, and this is what I said on the last slide, is to actually design a prototype bridge according to the specifications that government, the Roads and Transport Agency, is going to give us, because those road crossings where the road kills are happening are actually roads which are between 6 to 9 meters wide, and they often have very little vegetation on the side. So what is quite common in South Africa is that the road verges are cleared quite substantially. So I've already tried to find an engineering student who would like to help us design a sort of solid structure that we can put at the research facility, because we've got an area here which is a bit open because there was a historical clearing, and we could span a bridge, a prototype bridge, across that area to connect the canopy on both sides. So that is definitely, I would still like to actually use the pole design rather than the rope design. And I would also be interested to see at the end which of the two designs is actually cheaper in the long run and also easier to maintain. With predation, I can't answer that. From the camera trap images, we see that there are raptors perching, especially diurnal raptors perching on those bridges. That is one thing where I would be concerned that it might deter monkeys to get onto the bridges if they see that there are eagles actually perching on them. And maybe one could have a look at some way that raptors don't get deterred or might not perch, at least on the side poles, by maybe putting some sort of rounded topping on the poles on the side that the raptor can't really sit and perch on it properly. But I think aerial predators generally on those bridges could be a problem.
Okay, the second question is, there some sort of initiative from South Africa government to install more bridges?
If there is anything from government happening so far, you mean? Yeah, this is our biggest challenge, and I always get almost a bit frustrated when I see in the other talks that everyone is putting up these bridges, and we haven't gotten there yet. So South Africa has got, not just with primates, but with all kinds of other mammal species and other vertebrate species, has got a massive roadkill issue, and there are no overpasses or underpasses that are actually been installed through government initiative so far. So if you look at Western countries, they've got almost 40 years of putting overpasses, underpasses, and there's a lot of resources and funding going into that. But this is a major issue we're sitting with here, is that there is a lack of funding of resources. And of course, those resources that are available are allocated towards other more pressing socioeconomical issues. So we still have to find a strategy on how to get government buy-in. And I actually just talked to a colleague and friend of mine who's leading the Roads and Transport program from one of our biggest conservation organizations in South Africa. And she's currently putting together a cost-benefit analysis to try and show government agencies that by reducing road mortalities or road collisions between cars and wildlife, it could probably actually work out to be a saver, because there's at least, I think there are estimates that it's 1.3 billion rands a year that is caused just through road collision with wildlife, and that excludes all the health insurance claims when people get injured. So I think this is the major next big step that we have to get into to try and get things implemented.
Okay, thanks, Bibi. But the last one, what role do you think awareness campaigns and public engagement can play in this line of work?
as with the other presenters already, I think it becomes quite clear that getting buy-in from communities that live with the primates is very important. I figured out in my work that many people here in the area I am in didn't even know Samango monkeys before. They were all aware of vervet monkeys, but Samango monkeys have got quite a restricted distribution in South Africa, and not many people actually know them. So through engaging the public on the roadkill problem, we made them aware as well that there's this rare and threatened primate in their neighborhood, and many people became quite happy to hear about it, and a lot of people became very protective about having Samango monkeys in their gardens. And of course, with the roadkill issue, it's important to appeal to drivers and to try and change driver behavior, that to make drivers more aware that there are certain hotspot areas where people can expect that there are animals crossing, that people adhere to speed limits. So I think that is quite important to have a full support of the public.
Okay, thank you very much, Bibi. And now Tremy.
Thank you too.
Hi, I'd like to invite all of the speakers to turn on their cameras, and we'll have a general question session. We're also being joined by a couple of Saki monkeys who were interested to ask some questions. One question that we've had that Fernanda had the opportunity to answer, but I think it would be great for Anna to answer about her bridges, and then also Bibi maybe about the pole bridges. I think would be cool to hear about is durability, and how those bridges are doing over time. If you have like problems with UV exposure, or with, I don't know, animals gnawing on them, that I can see that being a major concern, or how frequently do you need to give them maintenance, things like that. Maybe we'll start with Anna.
Yeah, so I think our first problem was we didn't realize the amount of support they needed, because they're a bit heavy and they need to go quite a long, for us, quite a long distance. So we had to reinforce them with wire. So we ended up reinforcing, having almost 2 long wires that also reinforced the bridges, and some poles that held them up along the way. And if we didn't have that in the first years, so in 2015, most of them blew down, so that they fell down very badly. And then we looked at actually just what local farmers were doing, and the wire and the pole supports helped them. We never had animals chew on them. And we have really heavy winds, so they have to withstand heavy wind, and they can move a little bit in the wind, but the animals still use them when it's windy. But until now, we've installed about 30 of them altogether, that are still more or less upright and standing. And so in the first year, there were about 10 that fell down that were useless, and then once we had the right pattern, they tend to stay. We do have to put some repairs. The UV damage is important, but we just check with the farmers regularly if anything is leaking, and we use tape to repair them as well, so that but ours are very easily accessible because they're not so high in the air as the ones we've been seeing. So I think that makes it a little bit easier. So they can sort of be pulled down and then heaved back up again. It's probably not a great answer. I can get the data for that though, and I could analyze the data and give you a much better answer.
Yeah, we give you 2 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Bibi, can you tell us about your pole bridges, and you know exactly what they're made of, and how you manage maintenance and durability?
Yeah, so first of all, I think I have to reiterate that those bridges that we used were for the experiment. So they are not bridges that we put up at actual road crossings. So for the experiment, we used bamboo poles. So they were actually available at the Ridge facility. There's a big bamboo stand that someone planted years ago, and so they were available to us. And we put them up for the experiment, and I would say about 3.5-4 years later, they have basically completely disintegrated through, I would say it's probably through UV rain. We get during the rainy season, we can sit here for days and days and days just in mist, so it's high humidity. So the durability using bamboo poles also across a 6-meter wide road. So again, in the experiment, the road was just a farm track, and having a 6-meter long bamboo pole, I think, is not going to be feasible. So we were looking at rather using gum poles. So there are a lot of blue gum plantations here, eucalyptus. But yeah, as said, for that prototype to actually see, okay, how does the structure have to be designed for putting it at the actual road crossing points? We do need, I think, some real, some people who are good in designing bridges, who've got knowledge of statics and all the rest of it, because I think otherwise government is not going to approve it. They will give us specifications as well of how high the bridge has to be, how close next to the road it can be, the side poles. So these are all things that we have to translate our experiment into. So I can't really say what material would last longest.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a question for the long term. We did it. We experiment with a liana that was 20 meters long. We strung it across a clearing, and it was used immediately by animals, but it also broke down. It couldn't withstand that stretching pressure, so it broke after about 8 months. But I think we should go with one last question for Fernanda, and then we can go to our breakout sessions where everyone can ask their questions in person. You'll have to choose a continent when you choose your breakout session, but you'll be able to come back into the common room and go to a different breakout session if you'd like. So just to ask one last question to you, Fernanda. There's a question from Marie Mills about whether you have signs alerting drivers to these monkey crossing hotspots, either on roads or the bridges themselves, if signage has been effective at all.
The howler monkeys?
Yes.
For me, right?
Yes, for you. Mm-hmm.
So there are some signs, but they are not. So they're not in all bridges. They are not very visible, and this would need to be replaced to be more informative for people. But yes, there are. But since it's a neighborhood, a lot of people already know the canopy bridges, and so like some random people would not notice them above their heads, but like the residents, they know the bridges, and they see the monkeys crossing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I saw a cool video. Someone sent me a video from their project in Costa Rica this morning where on a 4-lane highway, cars just zooming by and this howler monkey crossing very nervously. I can imagine it's a little bit of a traffic hazard also when you see a monkey crossing above your head. Okay, well, thank you so much to our speakers today, and I will go ahead and share my, I'm sorry, I would like to end with 2 last polling questions. I'm sorry, Bert, and then it's your turn again to close us out before our breakout session. So if we could have those questions. So we'd just like to learn a little bit about what the audience knows about canopy bridges, and perhaps what your sources of information are. So before this seminar, how would you rate your knowledge of canopy bridges? Are you a true expert? Are you an expert in the making? Have you read a little bit about them and know a little bit about them? Have you heard maybe of one project or so? Or is your knowledge very low and you had no idea what a canopy bridge was before this session? In fact, you might have been expecting an entirely different session. And then our second closing question is, what have been your main sources of information? Has it been peer-reviewed publications, popular articles, things on social media? We hope that Facebook page will be a source of information now. Or has it been personal experience? Or finally, has this been the first time you've ever heard about canopy bridges? I'm going to give everybody just a few more seconds. It looks like we're still getting answers, which is great to see. And then I'll tell you what kind of information we're getting. Okay, I'm gonna end the polling now. And if you can see the results, we see that we had a medium, or the largest group here was people that had a medium amount of knowledge about canopy bridges, but we had some experts and aspiring experts, and those who were learning about canopy bridges for the first time, which is exciting that we were able to introduce you to them. Then with regard to your sources of information, it looks like for the most part, it's peer-reviewed publications that people are using, but popular articles and social media, personal experience are also obviously really important. I think any way we can get the word out about bridges is going to be valuable. So I'm going to stop sharing those results. Thank you very much, everybody, for contributing to the polling today. And I'm going to share our last slide, and then we will invite everybody to the meeting. Sorry, the Zoom meeting, in which we'll be able to go to the breakout sessions, and you'll be able to choose your breakout session once we all are on that meeting link. So once we have our closing remarks, you'll need to leave this Zoom session and then click the link that should be in your email to the Zoom meeting, in which we'll be able to speak freely in breakout sessions. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much, Fernanda Abra, my co-organizer, who's been working with me a lot on this. For our three speakers, Bibi, Fernanda, and Anna, it's been wonderful to work with you. Thank you, Bert, for having us today, and Marilyn for encouraging us to do this seminar. Thank you, everybody.
Again, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you've enjoyed this event as much as I have. I think each of the presentations were wonderful. I want to remind you that the American Society of Primatologists Conservation Committee is hosting this event, and we really appreciate your generosity in supporting our effort to fund primate research. And as noted earlier, we're now moving to the after party Zoom meeting. The new link has been sent to all of you by email during the past hour or so. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you there in a few minutes. So again, thank you. It's been a wonderful event, and hope to see you at the after party.